sending National Guard troops leads to more chaos, which by the way, Trump loves because he wants nothing more than for Americans to be distracted by the shock and awe as he's taking your tax dollars, funneling it to a genocidal government that's carrying out a genocide and a land grab in the Middle East. And at the same time, please don't pay attention to the lies and the cover up of the Epstein files.
People I watched in Illinois, Chicago, Illinois is a disaster. I have property there, it's a disaster. What's going on in Chicago. And you get Pritzker, he's violating our rights. As you all know, Chicago's a killing field right now. And they don't acknowledge it. And they say, we don't need him, freedom, freedom. He's a dictator, he's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense and I'm a smart person.
And the president of the United States, Donald Trump, seems to have a lot of admiration for dictators on a global scale. But nonetheless, let's focus on what's happening here in the US, because this morning, President Donald Trump implied that he plans to deploy National Guard troops to other jurisdictions, including Chicago. And he said so during this Oval Office Q&A sesh with journalists. Now, he went from claiming that some people want a dictator to calling Illinois Governor JB Pritzker a slob. So Trump was essentially signing executive orders. That's what spurred the Q&A with journalists. He wants to end cashless bail in DC. He also wants to make flag burning a criminal offense punishable by a year in prison, even though this is an issue that's been adjudicated by the United States Supreme Court. As much as anyone might hate watching protesters or individuals burn the American flag, you have the right to do it. It's protected by the First Amendment. And there are even some conservatives, to their credit, who are speaking out against what Trump is trying to do with this executive order. Now, it's been 2 weeks since Trump deployed the National Guard to Washington, D.C. after declaring that there's a crime emergency and they need the National Guard to respond to it. Now he's claiming total success and victory in DC. It only takes 1 week, the crime situation completely solved. Take a look.
I don't like going to a town, a city, place, a state, and then be criticized by some corrupt or incompetent governor where crime is rampant. Like, take a look at DC, crime was rampant. It was at the all-time worst. It got really bad during the Biden 4 years. And then I have a mayor stand up and say how crime has reached a 30-year low. 30-year low. People are being killed left and right. And it's not a 30-year low. Think of it. So for 11 days, there's been no murders. The record goes back years where that's happened. They haven't seen that happen in years.
So the one thing that you can't really lie about in the crime statistics, because I think we can all acknowledge that crime statistics do get manipulated sometimes, often by local law enforcement in order to make it appear that they're doing an effective job in lowering crime. However, when it comes to things like murder and homicides, you really can't fudge the numbers there. And so when it comes to that issue, it is true that that type of violent crime has gone down in Washington, D.C., whereas there are some other areas of crime, like carjackings, for instance, where it's continued to be a problem in DC. However, for me, based on my read of how Trump is handling the situation, not just in DC, but what he's threatening to do in other cities, I don't really think this is about tackling crime. If it were about tackling crime, he would feel very uncomfortable with the fact that there was an Israeli government official on US soil attempting to rape American children and get away with it, and that our government let him flee back to Israel with no consequences. Anyway, but Cenk, what are your thoughts about what's going on here?
Yeah, so number one thing I'm worried about is whenever Trump says, some people are saying it, fill in the blank, it's always something he wants to do, or something he thinks about himself. Some people are saying I'm the best president that's ever existed. Some people are saying my polling is better than Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. No one's saying that. You're saying that there was no polling back then, right? So I can give you a list of about a couple hundred examples of that. So when he starts saying some people want dictators, I'm like, oh no, right? And so nobody's surprised by this, and I really do mean that, except for I guess the independents who voted for him, because hardcore MAGA loves it. They're like, oh yeah, military take over the streets, live under tyrannical government. This is what we've been waiting for or warning about.
I got some stats for you, Cenk.
Okay, that's interesting.
There's
so I don't know
that. That's pretty terrifying, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? Okay, let me pause here. Give us the facts, and then I'll come back.
So I came across this poll right before we went on air, and the statistics here are the percentage of Americans who are in favor of essentially doing away with our democratic system and instead head toward authoritarianism. It's crazy. So this is a recent Ipsos poll. They published it on August 1st. When asked about support for an authoritarian system, a worrying 41% of Americans think having a strong leader who does not have to bother with parliament or elections is a very good or fairly good system.
Parliament?
I mean, this had to do with Americans specifically, right? But I think they were like trying to do a general, like how do people feel about democracy worldwide? This view gained slightly more support among men, 45%, than women, 37%. Higher earners and younger people were most likely to support a more authoritarian style. But also 39% of Americans believe the government can be trusted. Only 39% of Americans believe the government can be trusted. So please help me, square that circle, I guess. How do you think you can't trust the government on one hand, but you're calling for an authoritarian government on the other hand?
No, I actually can't square that circle. I think that's funny that you mentioned that, because that's what I was going to go to in those numbers. So look, I think an alarmingly large number of people in any society would say yes, authoritarianism, if they thought it was going to keep them safer. That is why there's the old line, I think, from Benjamin Franklin about, if you trade freedom for security, you'll have neither, right? And so, but that is basically the equation that people have been having to deal with throughout history, right? So a king or an authoritarian leader or a dictator can just slaughter anyone he likes and bring peace through significant government violence, right? Right, wrong, guilty, innocent, doesn't matter, but they bring down the violence other than the one that they're creating, right? So there's this natural, sometimes reflex for people to go, oh, okay, just give me a dictator, right? And then I'll be safer. Now, Trump is using this in a situation where crime had gone up for a little while. We documented it on the show, received a lot of flack for it, but it was real. But now crime is going down in a lot of the cities, and he's doing it anyway, because he always wanted to do it, right? And so here, I don't think that it's being received that well overall. So 41% is a troubling number, but again, you're seeing it all across the world. But how does that connect to, well, we don't believe in our institutions anymore? That's exactly why they're doing it. Because at a time where we do not have significant violence or crime in the country overall, when people are still saying this, I think it's because, Anna, they're so black-pilled and they're so desperate that they're like, well, none of this works anyway. Congress never does anything.
I'm gonna tell you what it is.
Hold on, we're never protected by anything. The government never looks out for us. So they're desperate. So in their desperation, they go, well, maybe law and order will do it. Maybe the military will do it. I think that's why the same people who are so deeply frustrated with our institutions are ironically a lot of the same people who go, well, then let's try something new, like military rule.
No, I mean, look, I think that analysis is actually spot on, because after now several years of, look, I think there's a distinction that needs to be made here, right? Because things that typically would have been thought of as crime, serious crimes, in a lot of these big cities were reclassified. And so what people reclassified as misdemeanors or lower level crimes, right? But it's still the same act that really does bother local communities. And they're like, what is up with this disorder? What is up with my quality of life going down year after year? And people are getting frustrated about it. Put it in the full context, guys, of Americans are working harder than ever before. Their money is worth less than it was just a few years ago. So you're working harder, you're barely able to make ends meet. Obviously, these big cities are very expensive to live in. So as you're shelling out more and more money and working harder and harder in order to just be able to exist and survive in these big cities, you are experiencing your quality of life go down the drain. And then you're also being told by local politicians, state politicians, even politicians on a federal level, depending on which political party they belong to, it's all in your imagination, everything is great, shut up, you're helping Trump. And so we have to acknowledge that reality. We have to acknowledge that when people are living in cities where you see like literally open air drug markets, something that we did not at all accept just like 10 years ago, well, yeah, that creeps people out, that freaks people out. They think that there's this disorder, there's this anarchy, and they get scared. Yeah. And so rather than have a good solution for that during the Biden administration, what did Biden do about that? Nothing. On a local level, what was done about that? Nothing. It's all in your imagination. We're gonna gaslight you. We're gonna make you out to be a bad guy. Why are you a secret Republican? And then Trump swoops in and Trump does what he does, right? It creates a perfect avenue for someone with authoritarian tendencies to exploit the situation for his own purposes. And that's what's happening right now. Do I think Trump actually cares about your quality of life? No, I don't. Because in fact, sending military or sending National Guard troops leads to more chaos, which by the way, Trump loves because he wants nothing more than for Americans to be distracted by the shock and awe as he's taking your tax dollars, funneling it to a genocidal government that's carrying out a genocide and a land grab in the Middle East. And at the same time, please don't pay attention to the lies and the cover up of the Epstein files. Please don't pay attention to the fact that an Israeli government official got caught in a sting operation attempting to have sex with a 15-year-old girl, and we let him go. We let him go back to Israel. No consequences, no punishment. Please don't pay attention to that. Shock and awe, shock and awe, shock and awe. I mean, you want to talk about criminality, you want to talk about crime? How much crime has the Trump administration enabled on an international level?
Yeah.
Don't talk to me about crime.
Yeah, we're gonna show you later in the show Israel murdering rescue workers on live television. And obviously we sent them the money to do that through Trump and through Biden earlier. Okay, so guys, look, I'm worried about the military takeover of the streets. It actually does connect to Israel in some way through Palantir. Palantir right now is doing facial recognition and AI programs to figure out which Palestinians to murder in Gaza. Now, I'm not. That's a program that Israel is running. I should be clear. Palantir is connected to the IDF and the Israeli government. They're also connected to our government. I'm not positive that Palantir is running that specific AI program. That's called Where's Daddy, where they wait for someone picked like almost randomly by AI. They claim, oh yeah, that's that guy knew a terrorist who knew someone else who knew a cat who knew a dog, etc. And they wait for him to get home and then they murder his entire family, right? They drop a bomb on them. So, but Palantir is working with the, you can call it deep state intelligence agencies, whatever you want, of Israel and America. They're basically practicing tyranny in Israel, which they will then bring over here once we have military all over the streets. So that's why I think the MAGA guys who had all those flags with "Don't tread on me," like throwing a ticker tape parade for treading on us, is deeply ironic and crazy. In terms of crime, look, both sides drive me crazy on this, and they'll hate this, and they'll hate the whole clip, and you'll hate me for saying it if you're on one of the two sides. But on the Democratic side, Anna's right. We've done great damage by pretending there was no crime, or the crime had not risen. It was a right-wing narrative. People weren't actually frustrated. It was all a myth. It was all fantasy land, and you're helping the right wing by talking about it, etc. You were totally wrong. I know you're in your bubble, and in your bubble you were safe, and you thought, oh, I'm protecting minorities. No, you were hurting minorities. That's why Oakland recalled their mayor. I keep going back to that because unfortunately, the people who kept saying that there was no crime in Oakland never talked to anyone in Oakland. That vote was overwhelming. It was a recall super early, which is dramatic already. Even if it passed by 1 point, it would have been shocking. Instead, it passed by 22 points, and they recalled her because they were sick and tired of the crime, and they were black and brown communities who were like, we would prefer not to be robbed.
NAACP, even before the recall of the DA, NAACP kept putting out statements. This isn't working. This is hurting our communities. We need to enforce the laws better so people aren't victimized by this crime. But who knows? I mean, we're just crazy. I don't know. I don't even know. Propagandists, I guess.
No. So look, guys, this is really important as a general point as well, okay? So when we pointed out the NAACP was saying, please, the African Americans in Oakland and all these other cities are asking for help, right? They're not asking you to take away cops. They're not asking to get beat by cops. They're asking for cops to serve and protect the community, which is what we agree with 100%, right? I swear to God, other hosts were saying, oh yeah, that doesn't count because NAACP is well-known Republicans. What? Okay, so, all right. But what happened, guys, is why do we warn you about that? Number one, we as progressives should be, I'll speak for myself, we want to protect the victims of injustice. Victims of crime are victims of injustice. And especially in the cities, if you care about race so much, the victims are disproportionately minorities.
Yep.
Why are you not protecting them? You don't protect them by bashing them in the head by cops that are out of control or shooting them too early, etc. But you also don't protect them by taking away all protection. And it's not me saying it, it's them saying it. But we couldn't get anyone on the left to recognize that. So then Trump started, and the Republicans started picking up Black voters, Latino voters, etc. People going, well, I want to be protected, right? And then what did our side do? Oh, well, you guys are fascist and racist. They're Black, they're not racist. They're Latino, they're not racist. They're asking for protection. And now the pendulum swings way too far in the other direction. Yep. And now Trump uses that as an excuse. As an excuse, exactly. For a military takeover. And if you're one of the folks who are in the great middle, who don't want a lot of crime, right? And who don't want the military to take over our streets, what you should ask for and what's reasonable is, give me better policing and maybe a little bit more policing.
Yes, that's exactly right.
But bringing in the National Guard or the Marines, when the Marines can't do policing anyway inside the country, doesn't help you anyway. So like it's counterproductive, it goes in the wrong direction, it doesn't actually make you safer. So why not ask for something that actually will make you safer? And which, by the way, would be way more popular.
Look, the final thing I'll say about this is, look, Trump is now planning on sending National Guard troops to Baltimore, to Chicago. Look, when it comes to federalizing the police force in DC, that's one thing. Trump does have the jurisdiction necessary to do that. You start, getting close to questionable legal territory when you start doing this in other cities. So we're gonna wait and see how this plays out. Obviously, there is resistance from these cities when it comes to National Guard troops. But the final thing I'll say is, there was a time when we had record crime all across the country, and we didn't need troops to swarm into cities to do something about it, okay? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We needed to reform policing so you can prevent the kinds of disgusting incidents like what happened in the murder of George Floyd. We need to reform the prisons so they're not just torture chambers, so people can actually be rehabilitated and go back into society and live wonderful, thriving lives. That's what I envisioned when it came to reforming our criminal justice system. But we went in all sorts of weird directions. Trump doesn't give a damn about your quality of life and whether or not crime is, hurting people in these big cities. This is his shock and awe, strategy. And as we're hyper focused on this, he and his cronies are looting the government of its resources. He's essentially being dog walked by a foreign country that's committing genocide and has become a pariah state. And we allowed a child sex offender to flee back to Israel. That is unacceptable. You can't claim to care about crime if you're gonna allow that injustice to stand.
All right, my last point is, look, the one tiny bit of good news in all this that we just shared with you guys is as the hardcore MAGA is saying, oh, we love the military takeover in the streets, tread all over us. It's maddening to me, totally maddening. If you're a principled conservative or libertarian, I don't know why in the world you would want that. That's crazy. You don't even know your own principles, okay? But the silver lining is, in a shocking turn of events, in one I did not expect at all, the right wing has turned on Trump on flag burning. Tons of right wingers going, no. I hate anyone burning the flag, and it's totally unacceptable, which I agree with. And by the way, if you're burning an American flag at a protest, you're burning the whole protest politically, because strategically you want Americans on your side. You don't want them to hate you. That makes no sense. The people who do it are usually self-aggrandizing clowns. But do they have a right to do it? Yes, and that's what the left has been saying forever. And now, shockingly, right-wingers all over the place are going, no, that's freedom of speech. I hate the guys doing it, but you get to do that in this country. And that is a development I did not expect. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets its wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.